Catherine Murphy, please.
Thank you. Taoiseach, for decades we've been known as a low-tax economy. Our 12.5% corporate tax rate has been the single most identifiable thing about our industrial policy. The one constant thing that multinationals could rely on, a rate that was retained when the country went bust and we had to be bailed out. But Taoiseach, the OECD is going to turn our 12.5% North Star into a supernova. We all know change is coming with the global minimum corporate tax rate. There is an inevitability about this. Your own evolving language and that of the Tánaiste and the Minister for Finance on this issue suggests that you accept that change is coming too. But what would that change look like? What will our unique selling point be then? Some countries attract FDI. Not only do they have skilled workforce, but they have excellent public services and they have an affordable cost of living. Ireland will not attract companies on that basis. Our dysfunctional housing market means housing costs here are the most expensive in the EU. According to the Eurostat survey, housing costs in Ireland are a whopping 78% above the EU average. Our wages 78% above the EU average. In fact, they're not, because we have the third highest proportion of low-paid workers in the EU. When it comes to healthcare costs, Ireland is the only country in Western Europe that doesn't have free universal coverage for primary care, which makes government failure to implement sláinte care all the more deplorable. Our roads are clogged with traffic and our public transport is at capacity and will soon be oversubscribed, with vital infrastructure projects such as Metrolink and DART Plus now seemingly delayed to 2034. Our energy costs are the fourth highest in the EU, and that was before the current explosion in prices which will put huge strain on families and households this winter. The energy crisis goes even deeper than this. The Business Post has reported that an 80 billion investment by Intel is in serious jeopardy because of antiquated energy and water infrastructure, while the IDA has warned serious reputational damage could be done if these issues are not addressed urgently. Taoiseach, we know we have a highly educated workforce, but when the corporate tax rate has changed and the global playing field is levelled, the cost of living crisis in this country will factor much higher in the calculations of companies considering setting up here or indeed investing here. Why would you go to a country where workers can't afford a home? You can't guarantee that the lights will stay on when you can go elsewhere and not suffer a tax penalty for doing so. So my questions are, what is our industrial policy going to look like when the 12.5% tax rate is gone? Because from this side of the House, it doesn't look like there's much of a plan or that there's policies in place. Is the government going to announce new measures in the National Development Plan that will address the serious infrastructural deficits in the context of that new industrial environment?
First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising this important question. I wasn't quite clear on the Deputy's own position in terms of whether the corporation tax should stay at 12.5% or should increase. But no, I just whether you agree with that or not, or it would be interesting to get a kind of a clear statement. I know that, but one can ask rhetorically back as well, surely, and articulate a view. I'm just seeking clarity. That's all. But could I make the point though that it's not the unique selling point of attracting foreign investment into the country? That's the first point I make. I think one of the most important decisions made by modern Ireland was to join the European Union. That has been critical to the continued economic transformation of our country. No, the party of which I am a member, No Lead, was the party that led that, with other parties who supported our entry into the European Union. Others opposed it at the time, others opposed it for about 30 years until they saw the light. But it was is a very important policy in terms of our economic well-being and development, and still represents, even this week when I was in New York talking to companies that are going to locate in Ireland, I made the point to them that if there were questions about skills base and so on, that our membership of the European Union has been a huge buffer. The only English-speaking member state now, and so on. That's important. Secondly, the decision in the 60s to bring in free second-level education and to open outwards. The Lamass leadership of opening outwards was a key turning point in modern Ireland. And also investment in third-level education over successive generations is a key selling point for Ireland. Very, very important. Because repeatedly and consistently, companies that have located here, from the Intels to the Eli Lillys, to companies all over the country, will say to you that the quality of the workforce here is second to none and is very strong. That's a tribute to the education system right throughout. Our more lateral investment in research from about the late 1990s onwards is paying dividends in terms of a higher quality investment that comes in terms of R&D, but we have to do more there into the future. The tax has been important. Do not understate that at all. And that is why we have entered reservations in the OECD's position. We have not signed up to the OECD consensus. And the reason we have not signed up is because of the lack of certainty in what has been proposed so far. Because the key issue for those who invest in Ireland is they want certainty over the overall industrial policy framework, including tax. They don't want a situation that's going to change every 2 to 3 years in terms of the base rate. And also there's far more detail in this consensus in terms of what companies are going to be covered, the threshold around turnover, and also in terms of certain sectors like financial services has been carved out. So negotiations are not complete at all. And I think we've made it very clear that certainty and continuity, which has always been the hallmark of our taxation policy, would be maintained.
Deputy Murphy.
Taoiseach, I think there's an inevitability about the OECD and a minimum rate. And I noted your comments last week. When Intel invested in Ireland, I'm very aware of it because I actually live in the same town as Intel are located. That was in the late 1980s, early 1990s, before the facility was up and running. There wasn't a housing crisis that there is now. There wasn't there wasn't some of the issues in terms of cost of living that there is now. And I think it would be short-sighted not to look at a unique selling point that factors in some of the issues, like, for example, the deficit in energy. I mean, obviously the data centres is an issue there, but we tend to have quite a short-sighted approach in terms of crises. We're very good at crisis management when we get there, but planning to make sure we don't have that crisis is where we're not good.
Deputy.
And I want to know what alternative industrial policy is being considered that would be a unique selling point other than the corporate tax rate.
But the point I'm making is the tax rate on its own is no longer a unique selling point. That's the point. It never was, actually. I think it was very important, but the other 2 points I referenced in terms of investment in education and investment in, joining of the European Union were also key fundamental pillars of the economic transformation of this country over 50 years. And a consistent industrial policy as well that's been pro-enterprise. It is important to be pro-enterprise. Not everybody in this House have always been pro-enterprise, but that is important, and that people get that sense of the country when they arrive into the country. We've also, you're correct, you reference Intel, and it's a very interesting example. We are now a centre of manufacturing excellence globally because of our experience over 30 or 40 years. We have benefited human capital-wise and in terms of processes, in terms of how to manufacture. We are reliable partners in terms of being a country where manufacturing excellence is so evident. I was down at the Intel site recently. It was quite stunning, not least to see all of the construction companies there. In terms of I think there was 4,500 workers on site on construction alone, delivering.
Thank you,
like
Taoiseach. Time is up.
Precast concrete, like first in the world, what they're doing in respect of the Intel
Time
plant.
is up, please.
In terms of Intel sites all over the world. We can knock ourselves a lot, and we do need to recognise the challenges. Sometimes we need to acknowledge
Time
and
is
appreciate
up.
the good stuff that's happening in the country also.